It begins. Hello, we are live, and welcome to Performance Check. My name is Rob, and I am happily, gladly, immensely privileged to be joined by the one and only Lloyd Collins from JARLDM. Say hey, man.
Quite an introduction. Hey, man.
It is, and I've just realised I've not stopped the sound on the other YouTube video, so now I'm echoing in my ears, and it's absolute abject torture. There we go.
That is
my God.
true horror, is listening to yourself talk while you're talking.
Oh my God, that was like, they actually use that as like a torture technique. That's an actual true story, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you very much for joining us here. We've got a few topics that we're going to be covering today. But first of all, I thought we could start off with a bit of bants, a bit of 1-2. I was asking Lloyd at the very beginning before we hit record, because Lloyd's been playing the brand new hit video game. Wait, is it Warhammer Total War?
I think it's Total 2? War Warhammer 2.
They missed the trick. It should just be called Total Warhammer.
I know. Yeah, I think
that's such a better title. But you've been playing that, and Lloyd's just been telling me very briefly, like how he feels about the game, because it's in our wheelhouse. It's fantasy, it's strategy. Lloyd, is it going to affect your future as a gamer? Have you been inspired by this new experience?
It's really good. The races are really unique. Particularly, there's two elf races that you can play. You can play the high elves and the dark elves, which are both interesting in their own ways. But the two that are really fascinating to me is lizard men, who are just incredibly well designed, just really great, and the Skaven, who are hilarious. And I was saying to my friend the other day that they're like orcs in my mind, like the Warhammer orcs, in that they're so characterful. Like all of the things in the game are it's all very Skaven, like all of the things they say are very Skaven-y, and they have this real sort of character to them, and everything they do is like when you like click attack, some of them say like, because Skaven do this thing where they put two words together, Yes. So, and one of them is like, what was it? It's something like attack flee, which is the same word, but like they mean that like attack and flee are equally likely, because they're such little shitty cowards. It's just great. Yeah, it's just really, really, really damn good.
I absolutely love the Skaven. I always have. I've loved, in particular, there's a character in the Skaven hierarchy, or whatever you'd call it, called Deathmaster Schnicht. And he's just this rad lord assassin rat. And he fights with two swords in his paws, but then he has a third one that's being held by his tail. And he sort of he can drop behind enemy lines and stuff and take out leaders. And oh man, just so cool.
The Skaven guy that you can play is Queek Headtaker, who's like a commander or whatever, and he's just like in love with his own legend, and so he like possibly gains experience from other lords because he pretends like it was him that did the thing, which is a great mechanic, yeah, very good.
They definitely have like a real sense of humor about them as well. I imagine playing as a Skaven army, either in the actual modeling hobby and the tabletop hobby, or in the video game, I don't think I'd ever feel bad about losing with the Skaven, because they're just so nuts, and that in the grand scheme of things for them, it doesn't really matter. Like they might have lost on their own.
You do get absolutely shagged by other armies. Like your Skaven warriors are really bad. You need thousands of them, like so many, in order to like have any effect on a lizardman army, who will just like smash through your lines with no problem. Which I really like. You have to have just these hordes and hordes of like crappy dudes in order to make any difference.
I think that's like, and I mean, I don't want to clump them into a group, but they're like a bad guy army. So there needs to be like hordes and hordes and hordes of them rolling over the hills and stuff. And it's funny, we're speaking about Warhammer. I believe Warhammer were the ones that penned the term grimdark, or it came from the fandom. Is that right, Lloyd?
Yeah, from the Warhammer 40k fandom.
Yeah.
So there is, I would say the Warhammer fantasy is much more, it's way less dark. It's still dark, but it's way less dark. Warhammer 40k is grim and dark. And it's, where the term came from. I guess it's like they've been out since the 70s or something like that, and it's kind of been the way that you describe something awful and miserable is grimdark.
Absolutely. In fact, isn't its tag is in the grim darkness of the future there is only war.
Yes.
So
Yep.
So the first of our topics that me and Lloyd are going to be discussing today, there's been I'm a bit late to the game, but I've been moving house, as you might see from the change of area. I don't know what I was going to say there. The
Scenery?
decor, whatever. Scenery. That's yeah, absolutely. The change of scenery. So anyway, so there've been a few things that have been spoken about in the community that I wanted to catch up on, and I thought that this is definitely Lloyd's wheelhouse, and I know he's going to battle to the death for one of these things and not the other. We're talking about Bright Hope versus Grim Dark. So Grim Dark, you probably already got the impression of if you hadn't heard that before. Now, Lloyd, what does Bright Hope mean?
It means a total waste of time, and you should avoid it. So it's kind of like the antithesis to Grimdark. So in Grimdark, you can expect like NPCs to be selfish and cruel. You can expect leaders to be corrupt. You can expect governments to be tyrannical. You know, while in Bright Hope, the opposite is true. You can expect like utopian cities and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, some people were saying in the community, in the sort of microcosm that the community is that we predominantly work in, there was a lot of people saying that because, I don't know, Grimdark, like there's quite a lot of Grimdark settings throughout the community, yours being, I'd say, probably the one that overshadows most of them with its grimness and its darkness. That's a good thing in my opinion, man. You're like the forefather. I'm not saying you did it first, but you're one of the forefathers in this community anyway. And there's been people that I don't know if they're just being hipster. I don't know if they're being, it says me with a tea cozy on my head. But I don't know whether they're just saying that to just be, you know, to like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I think that there's a natural thing that happens because it's become very popular to have worlds that are dark because sure. Westeros is, I would say, a grimdark world. If we're using grimdark just as a descriptor or whatever, Westeros for sure. You know, everyone is corrupt, everyone's selfish. There are no good guys except for maybe Jon Snow. Everyone's a bastard, right? That's like one of the key themes of Westeros. People are greedy and crappy and selfish, and so from that, lots of settings now have that feel where the world is corrupt and unfair, and you know, small people, like small folk, I should say, not small people, get trampled on and all sort of stuff. It's become very popular, and it's natural then when that's popular that there would be a backlash. But I just think it's really funny that the backlash is like, let's have a nice time. You know, it's like a really weird rebellion to me.
It is a weird rebellion. And I mean, to be fair, it's a given that sort of if we're just going to go with grimdark as the descriptive for, I don't know, including games and settings and stories that have, I suppose the main draw to that kind of thing, that it's really, really kind of like down to the human emotion, human motivation, like Game of Thrones, using Game of Thrones as an example, it shows you the perils of what humanity can become, and it shows the cost of that. It shows the cost of greed. It shows the cost of falling in love with someone that you were told you weren't supposed to be in love with, or whatever. There's like a very, very grounded level to the storytelling that takes place, and because of that, the world follows suit. You know, most of these have been derived because of the characters. The world comes afterwards, which is, I don't know, I suppose that is different from role-playing games, really, isn't it? It's the opposite. The world arrives first before the characters. Yeah. So I suppose you've got to...
I think that Westeros was a role-playing game setting. I think that's how it started for Martin. I feel like I've heard that a few times, that he like ran lots of games set in Westeros and it became this thing. I don't know how true that is, but I definitely feel like I've heard that a few times. So maybe it is true. But no, I think that like, so for me, the thing that I like about these grim, dark settings is that they feel real to me, more real than a world where people are altruistic and selfless. because, you know, you can name the people in our history who have been totally selfless and altruistic, you know, by counting your fingers, maybe,
Right.
in all of human history, you know. And so to me, it just feels like facetious and a little bit like, I don't know, like childish to think that like the world would be like that, especially in a world where like swords are common, you know. And like it's easier to imagine in a world like ours where everyone's connected and it's like most people don't have to toil or like kill for a living.
Sure.
But if you're talking about like a medieval society, how is there this like lovely utopia? It doesn't make sense to me, and it never will, I don't think.
Which is what I'm trying to like work out, and this is really, I decided I wanted to talk about this because, as with a lot of the streams I do on the Facebook groups or whatever, I like to like talk things through, because sometimes I like to have just a conversation with people, just so it's out there to help other people who watch this, but also to help me out, because I'm like, I want to nail down how I feel about this, and that's kind of what I want to do with the idea of bright hope. I think from our discussion, those watching can probably tell that me and Lloyd definitely fall more on the side than grim dark than bright hope. In fact, I think I fall somewhere just slightly off from the middle towards grim dark. But I want to see if there's anything that we could do that would make bright hope interesting in some way. I know, like, what are the rules like for bright hope? I mean, is there... Do you know what I mean? Like, when does it stop being bright hope? Like,
Yeah.
Can anyone die, for example? Can villains kill people? Like where do you draw the line? You know,
it's a tricky one, and I'm not really sure, like, because I can't think of many bright hope settings that exist, you know, because they're obviously going to be boring. For me, it would be very boring to have a world where, like, I guess, like, I don't know, I'm just gonna say Harry Potter. That's not one either. That's dark as shit, you know. And like, yeah, it's a tricky one. I like don't really know what it is so much. And like, people are talking about bringing in this like new age, and I say people, I mean Marquise, obviously. It's like
he is the new age.
This new age of like happy fantasy games where like high flying adventure and it's so boring. It's boring.
It's fine. It's fine. We have to understand that. I mean, the way that I look at it, like, I like the idea of having the principles of a bright hope game, but like putting it in a setting where you can just where it's fun and not like sheltered. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you were playing a game where there's like minimal lethality, there's really no effect. Or really like negative effects that are happening to the player characters because of decisions they made. At the end of the day, they're the heroes. They're going to win. Blah 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 blah. Like the example that jumped into my mind when I was thinking, what is a bright hope setting? And I thought Fable, the Fable series, and I thought, no, that's really dark. But what I think lifts it out and made me think of that was because of the sense of humor. There's a real sense of humor in Fable where there are people with funny voices. You can chase chickens and throw them off cliffs, but you can also be a murderous asshole, like, at the same time. So I thought maybe the thing to take from Bright Hope maybe is it's like favorable disposition, and then you can then infuse a bit of darkness within that, and it kind of then has a nice balance. What do you think?
I think that's possible. I was actually thinking about it there. I think maybe what it is that it's not as gray, so there's not a gradient of morality. So with Bright Hope, it might be really clear who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. So for example, okay, so in Middle Earth, all of the orcs are evil. There's no good orcs, right? They're all just like across the board, all of them are evil and hateful. Now Middle Earth, I don't think is a Bright Hope setting. I definitely think it's closer to dark than light. But, you know, I could imagine in a Bright Hope setting that, like, these are orcs and every orc is bad. Every orc is programmed to be bad. They're all evil and they all hate you. While these are the Knights of the Radiant Heart and they are all good and all just, and every single one of them is a hero. you know? So there's no, like, maybe less room for grayness. Like, for example, if I'm thinking about it in Iskloft, like, if there was an order, you know, like a mercenary company, let's say, it would be the idea that all of the people in that mercenary company have the same values and like all act in a similar way.
Yeah.
So they're all good. I guess alignment is a big part of Bright Hope, maybe, because it's not in Grimdark. Like, I have never played with alignment ever. I think it's more restricting than helpful, but that's because I play a lot of role-playing games and I understand what it's for.
Sure.
But I think that, like, when you play a game that's set in a world that doesn't have an alignment and people just act according to their needs and their greed and stuff like that and their whatever, then that to me leads a lot towards Grimdark, because you can have that order of radiant-hearted knights, but one or two of them might not be so radiantly hearted, or, you know, there might be some who are like at the top who are like, yeah, okay, well, they're all doing the good work, but I'm skimming some money off the top from the collection money or whatever it is, you know? So you can have a gradient within that holy order. While I think in Bright Hope, it's just they're all paladins and they're all lawful good, and they'd all, you know, jump in front of a speeding dragon to save a kid and whatever it is, you know? Yeah, I guess that's my guess.
I think you're pretty much spot on there. I think it's much more very defined sort of good and evil. I think you're absolutely right there. I think you've nailed it. Which I think the only use for pure Brighter Hope, as we've just said it there, is for, I don't know, maybe my first D&D. Like if you wanted to run a game for some kids or something, like you could totally do like a Bright Hope where there is an evil overlord or something, but like they're like a laughing, I don't know, like Jafar figure or something, you know, like rather than like a tortured, like three-dimensional villain. Yeah. Which is interesting. Because I think a lot of people, when like, I know I was first doing this, when people first started throwing around the term Bright Hope, the first thing that jumped into my mind was high magic. And I was like, no, you shouldn't, like, that isn't the same. It isn't the same. It's just that you have to remember that there's Bright Hope is the mood. Bright Hope is like the tone.
Yes. Yeah. It's the tone, I guess, or like the theme or something, you know?
Yeah.
Ties the world together.
And this kind of like, I'm going to sort of haphazardly sort of segue us into the next time. In fact, actually, I should look at the chat. I've not even looked at the chat, so there might be people saying things about the god. Okay, there's a fair amount.
It's big.
So hello, guys. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I see Jeff Dote is with us. T the writer, Grayson is also here. Taylor is here. So I'm going from. Let's see. T the writer says, I don't know anyone with the time or money to play Warhammer in real life. I'm glad there are video games now. It is very expensive. It is very pricey. However, I do know some people that still unyieldingly hand over fistfuls of cash to get whatever is released. And I'm just there like...
I have a lot of Warhammer.
I used to have a lot. I still have some.
I have a lot of 40k, like a lot. Way too much. Like, but I've never gone and bought like tons of it. I just like occasionally will pick up a box here for 20 quid, or, you know, every couple of like months or whatever, I'll get into it again. I'll be like, oh great, and I'll buy a box and I'll paint them, and then I'll just like leave them somewhere. And over whatever it's been, like 10 years, 20 years of like being into that hobby, I guess I've just accumulated an army, you know?
Yeah, like I was the same. Like I'd fall under its spell for a little bit, and then I'd throw my money at them, and I'd get like, I don't know, like I used to collect the Black Templar Space Marines.
Great.
I had a fair amount of dwarves that I then gave to my friend. I should have sold them, fool.
Yes.
And what else did I have? I think that was about it. I had some Nids, some Tyranids as well somewhere. That's sorry, anyway, just started thinking about Warhammer when think of the topic at hand. So Jeff Doty says, my issue with Bright Hope is that it seems a little difficult to justify how things are so great. You have to hand wave so much to ignore the pain and suffering that life comes with.
Yes, that's exactly it. you have to just assume, you have to make so many assumptions about the world when you're playing, like so many assumptions that aren't true in this world, that it just like and like I know you make assumptions in fantasy games that there are dragons or whatever, but it's still not the same thing to me. You assume something about the entirety of humanity and all other races, that they're somehow good instead of selfish,
Yeah. But I mean, my thought to that would be is that if you're thinking of the audience that you're delivering that to, they're obviously the audience that you are catering to with Bright Hope probably wouldn't be concerned with those things anyway.
Yeah.
If you like, they wouldn't want the suffering and the pain. They just want to go on fun adventures and cast spells and kill bad guys. Like, that's how I see it anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not for me, but each to their own. T the writer says Rob is the definition of the starving artist actor. You're not wrong. Not even enough money for a flipping hat. It is a glorified tea cozy. It's not actually a tea cozy, by the way, guys. That was it's like a beanie thing. Whatevs. It's because my hair is tragic today.
Tragic.
Moving on. Sorry, I go really diva sometimes. I don't know if you knew that about me. So Jeff then continues to say, not to say every single thing has to be constantly miserable, but it feels fake to toss that side of things away. Yeah. I think you get a bit of what's the word? Like it's a little slice of reality when you include like difficulty and things like that. And I think that's what a lot of people want to become immersed, really, like you were saying, Lloyd.
Yeah, it's for sure what I want. Like I want to. I won't get into it because it's long. Let's just read the next thing.
Okay. Taylor from Mums the Nerd says, is hope always utopian, or is it about the response the NPCs have to everything that happens? That's interesting, isn't it? Is Bright Hope always utopian, or is it about the response that NPCs have to everything? I suppose a lot of the game's tone does rely entirely on the players and how they play and how they react to things. Like if they're murder hobos and they start slaughtering the village they've just like vowed to help, then sure. But that's a very extreme example.
But it's also about factions, so like if you're talking about how a world feels, you have to think about organizations in that world. So like I said, with the Order of Radiant Heart Knights, right, you have this like, Order of Knights, and in a grim dark setting, they might be like horrible crusaders who like go and burn the Holy Land and rape and pillage and whatever, and they do it in the name of God, right? But in a Bright Hope, they might just be just these selfless, wonderful, altruistic, generous, like this order of like ideal, lovely people who like fight evil and save the world, and so it's not just NPCs, but also like organizations and even like governments and stuff, like the king in a Bright Hope setting might be a great king who's like cares about his people and makes sure the peasants aren't suffering and yada yada yada. But in a grim dark setting, that king just wants money and more wealth and more land,
I like that, but that's just made me think of this question, and it's not something I think I agree with, but it's something that I'd like to discuss, and that is continuing from Taylor's point, which I think is a very good point. In that case, then, is how much of a setting is defined by a tone rather than the things like what tech level is available and stuff. Like could the same setting. So, I mean, it's going to be foolish to ask because the answer is probably no for Iskloth. I was going to say it anyway. Can some settings withstand having a Bright Hope game played in it?
Iskloth could do it. Hands down, you could do Iskloth as like this like rowdy Viking adventure where like everyone's drinking and singing and like...
It's like How to Train Your Dragon.
yeah, exactly. And it's easy to imagine it that way. I think that would be a sham, a pathetic world. But it's something you could easily see happening where like there's high fantasy and there's like Valkyries and the player, and like it's doable, but I think you shouldn't do it.
Well, that's what I was asking. Like, should some settings have that flexibility to be able to do that?
You can do it with Middle Earth too. Like I run a darker version of Middle Earth, but like Carol runs a game of Middle Earth, which is also like totally valid, where like they go shopping for hankies, you know, and like that's that's like the same world, you know, but like it's not because of the feel or the theme, you know. So I think it actually has a lot to say about the you dying over the hanky thing.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I want to go shopping for hankies. My God, that sounds hysterical. Oh my God. Oh, that really got me, man. But I agree. Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think it helps that, like with Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth, like, is an established franchise. I mean, you see the same with Star Wars, don't you? You have lots of different tones that happen in Star Wars. Like the actual the newest set of the role-playing games is like divided into them. Like you've got your either Scum and Villainy, you've got your Forces of Destiny, you know, where there's a Jedi game. Like those have different tones, yet are still contained in the same setting. So it's interesting to see how flexible your setting is. Could it withstand a Bright Hope incursion? So I better carry on reading, because my goodness me. Let's see. Jeff Doe I'm so sorry, because you're continuing the point you've made before, but he says, especially if you're a capable wizard in a magical world, imagine the absolute mastery of self-control you'd have to have if you were a level 18 wizard who could literally bend anything to your will. Why are you not more afraid of wizards?
You'd need to be like a monk or something, you know, like a Buddhist monk, if you're a wizard of that power, not to use it to your advantage, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I'm a terrible person, but if I could stop time and like summon demons and teleport, like I would steal. At least I would steal, you know?
Of course I'd steal. I'd stop
so
time,
much.
walk into a bank, and then I'd have myself an amazing life.
You know, and like it would take just colossal self-restraint to like use that power for good. It's like asking, like Superman, right? Superman is all powerful basically.
Yep.
But I've talked about this before with you. I think Superman fights himself, doesn't fight bad guys. He fights his own morality, right? That's and that's what you're talking about with the level 18 wizard. Like you have to just fight your own morality and like your own selfish needs or whatever, rather than actual enemies.
Which I think is actually a far more interesting concept for a game than because there would have to be those impulses there.
Right, but I think in a Bright Hope setting they wouldn't be there. It would just be assumed that he's a good dude. You know?
So you're just like you're a fairy tale. You're like a kind-hearted wizard who's level 18 and can like summon meteors from the freaking stratosphere.
You're Gandalf.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just like, no, I just look after this temple. I don't use my powers for anything. Like so many meteors, and you're like, why? But
I just live in this tower and identify items for adventurers. That's what I do with my life. You know?
I literally sit here and I wait for someone to knock on my door. You know, nothing else happens here. Time literally freezes as soon as you walk away. I'm glad you're here, if anything. Anyway.
So Sam says, make Bright Hope interesting, run it. Who runs that type of game? Losers run that kind of game. Dweebs and noobs run that kind of game. No, I just like making big declarative statements. I don't know who runs that type of game. I haven't seen that type of game.
No, I don't think I have either.
And I think that's because it's probably really boring.
I think, well, I mean, we haven't seen it. Yeah. And I think the only the only thing that I can think of it being useful for is if you're like playing with kids. Like if you're, God, that sounded wrong. If you're running the game with, I'm in a silly mood, Lloyd, running the game with kids. So that's what I think it's useful for, in my opinion. Oh God. Jeff then says, how are there any powerful wizards who are kind of even sane in a world when they have that kind of power? Yeah, that's what we just covered, yeah. T the writer says, Bright Hope is more about ideological problems than physical ones, things like politics, what is art, junk like that. It's the top of the needs pyramid: food, water, shelter, love, and then existential stuff.
It's a good point. So maybe one of the things about Bright Hope is you don't have to worry about the bottom level or even the middle level of your needs. While in Iskloft, you need to wonder about where your next meal is coming from or if you can sleep without being eaten or killed, right? And so if those things are fine, then obviously your concerns are higher up, and then it's like shelter. Okay, we have that, and we have food, and blah blah blah. So then you get to the top of that thing, and you're like, what? Isn't it nice to be comfortable? What's magic about? Yeah, that sounds terrible to me. It's so boring.
I have just had a really niche idea for a sketch, niche because it just involves this, setting in D&D and stuff, or whatever. But I imagine there being a scene where there is a Bright Hope dungeon master, okay, and he calls his group, and they're used to playing Bright Hope. Like, kids have been firing arrows and not keeping count of how many arrows they've been firing. Like, they haven't said they've eaten in like 12 days, And then the GM says, "Hi guys, I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to be able to run the game for you today. Instead, my best friend Lloyd is coming around, and he's going to run tonight's game." And then after it's like, 6 levels of exhaustion. You've run out of arrows 10 days ago. You're already starving to death. Like, I would love to see that, like a switch of GMs, just to see what the impact would be like. Anyway, Caius then says, "I can still sense the good in you, Witch King." Oh, by Lloyd's definition, is Star Wars a Bright Hope setting?
Nope.
I don't
know. No, not at all. Like, one of the main characters in Star Wars is a drug dealer, a drug smuggler. Like, and like Darth Vader is like absolute evil. I guess you could. So if we're going by this definition of like evil is evil and good is good, Star Wars still doesn't fit that line, because there's lots of characters in the middle who like Han Solo or Boba Fett. Boba Fett's not necessarily an evil guy, and you can talk about lots of characters who exist in the Star Wars world that aren't. It's gray. There's lots of gray. You go to the cantina or whatever. There's lots of gray. So I would not call it a Bright Hope setting.
And also, one of the primary conceits of Star Wars is the transition of, alignment is part of the thing. Yes. You see characters go from the good to the bad, and the bad to the good, the light side of the dark. So, like, that's his whole thing. Jeff then says, "I think there's an important distinction to make with goals of a game. Like, I don't want my tabletops to be fun in the conventional sense. I don't really want to sit around and joke and laugh." That's fair enough. I think there's a time and a place. Like, I've played in many games where I've sat around and I've laughed and I've had a joke. But in fairness, that's always been in the context of what's happening in the game, not like joking about, like, I don't know, something from outside of it.
Right. I agree with Jeff on lots of things, and particularly on this. Like, I don't want my tabletop games to be, "Hey, we're sitting around, we're rolling dice. Isn't it fun to kill dragons?" Like, that's not what I want at all. I want to be like, man, what is it like to live in a Viking age, or what is it like to like live in the far future, and like the problems and like real issues that you would encounter there, and like moral quandaries. That's what I want. I don't necessarily like. I run a game that's beer and pretzel for my friends, but like, that's not the kind of game that I want to run. I just do that because they won't play a serious game, Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think that the idea of like having fun and having a good time, well, it's weird because fun, like, it is fun for me to like sit through 4 hours of Westerosi misery, Like, I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
But it's not fun in the conventional sense at all, Like, my character just suffers for 4 hours. But I've dealt with like all sorts of moral issues and like tactical issues and stuff. And at the end of it, I'm like, man, that was great. But it's not most people's idea of a fun game,
Agreed. And there is, to be fair, there is still laughing and having the crack and stuff. Like, even in Against the Shadow, even in Lawkeepers, like we laugh frequently in those games because funny shit just happens, and you laugh and you think about it, but in the context of the game, not like looking at your phone and reading something and showing someone a GIF. And then Caius then says, "Can you redeem evil in a grim, dark setting?" Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So it depends on the setting, I think, and depends on the evil, which is not a good, not a useful answer, but it depends. So if you're talking about Warhammer 40,000 and you're talking about a Chaos Space Marine who has been, possessed by a demon and has been that way for 10,000 years, I think it's unlikely that you're going to like convince that person to switch from that path. I think it's unlikely that if you're in Middle Earth and you meet an orc, or let's say the Witch King, that you're going to convince that thing to switch from its path. But the people in the middle, definitely. You know, if you meet some raiders on the road in Iskloft and they want to kill you, you can probably turn them to your side. You know,
Yeah.
would be my take on it.
With the classic settings, like you brought up Middle Earth there, like I think the thing, some settings, yes, but only from where they start out from. So if they're like a human being and they're from like Gondor, but they've been corrupted by evil or something, then they could probably be brought back. But if it's something that started from the essence of pure evil, because the setting includes pure evil, like there is a definitive like evil, like you've always been evil. Sauron has always been evil, and well,
no, he has. Yeah,
he's always had a bit of a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah,
it's hard to. Yeah, but I think it depends where they come from. I think you cover that point wonderfully, Lloyd. So we need to read some more comments.
yeah.
I want to feel deep and powerful emotions and change myself and push my boundaries. Experience what it's like to be other people in other worlds, etc. It's sort of it's different sort of fun. Yeah,
for sure. That's what I want to.
And it's like storytelling, you know, like, I mean, you have fun, like, watching, like, I don't know, let me think. Like, if you're watching a serious war, like a war film, if you're watching Saving Private Ryan, like, you're enjoying it, but, like, people are dying by, like, the hundreds and stuff. Right. Like, it's a grim topic, but you still enjoy watching the film. Like, same as with a role-playing game. Like, lots of grim stuff is happening, but you can still enjoy it because it's an experience. T then says perhaps Bright Hope could be anime based, like Made RPG. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, and that would make me even less interested in it. Like, I don't know how it's possible for me to be less interested in this concept, but if you make it anime, then I'm even less interested in it. It's never held.
I don't mind.
It's never held any interest for me at all. I cannot. I've tried with a couple. I tried to watch what's it called, Attack on Titan. And that was like a cool concept, but it's just ruined by people having 20-minute inner monologues where they're shouting at themselves and these ridiculous conversations where everyone's shouting and they're all just shouting their inner feelings. I just hate it. I think it's so lazy. It's so lazy.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you entirely, Lloyd, because I'm not like a huge fan. There are some that I do enjoy, I will admit. But yeah, it's a different style of storytelling, the Eastern style of storytelling that I have not been brought up with, so I don't have it like built in with me. And I also have some friends who are like mega into it, and like fair play, they really love it. But I've never got into it too much myself. Anyway, so Kaysen says, was there any chance of saving Gollum or redeeming Gollum?
For sure, yes, I think so.
So you think less of the other characters for not trying harder?
I think that it's possible, and I think that it's because the ring was there that it didn't happen. I think that if the ring wasn't there, then Gollum would have been redeemed. But the ring was there, and the ring is selfish, and the ring wants a certain thing, and it had great power over both Frodo and Gollum, and that's why he wasn't. But I definitely think it's possible. I can for sure see a situation where he becomes Smeagol again.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's one of the most poetic defeats of any kind of villain, really, because it's the effect that it's caused within Gollum is the thing that then leads to its destruction, because he just loses it with joy for having it back and just goes over the edge. In the book, anyway, like they sort of struggle in the film, don't they? Which I think is actually a bit better than him just dancing and then falling off the edge. You know what I mean? I always thought that. I always thought like, oh, couldn't they have just had a bit of a fight? So Jackson sorted that out for us, because Jackson is our boy, apart from for the Hobbit. So no, Taylor then says, Rob, would you call Equinox a 3-dimensional villain, or is that too many spoilers? You're just gonna have to wait and find out. Maybe I've put zero thought into him whatsoever, and he's just like a figurehead of evil with nothing behind him whatsoever. For those of you interested, go and check out us playing Lawkeepers, chapter 10, called Equinox, on the 13th of October. Oh god, there's so many more, and we haven't even got to the other topics yet. Lloyd, do you want to read a bit whilst I drink?
So Kaya says, is Narnia bright hope? There's an all-powerful good somewhere. There's still evil, but good will eventually win. I don't know enough about Narnia to comment properly on that. I've read them when I was a little kid, and I watched a film maybe 10 years ago, I guess. But I don't know enough about the setting to make an educated sort of statement about if it's bright hope or not.
I will make a sweeping proclamation about Narnia. Is that the fact that C.S. Lewis was whether he meant to or not, was totally allegorizing like massive Christian themes with Narnia. It's just all throughout it. And he and Tolkien, being good mates, would have arguments about this. They argued about the lamppost in Narnia. Tolkien was saying that shouldn't be there, and C.S. Lewis is like, nah, it should be. And that's exactly what they said. these really, really erudite Oxford professors are like, nah, mate, not at all. No, but I would say that Narnia is inherently a setting where the good guys will win because they are presenting the themes that the author is already behind. He is already a heavily Christian person. So his agenda is to ensure that those themes are the ones that are triumphant at the end. That's what I get from it anyway. I like Narnia when I was a kid, and I have, a bit of nostalgia for it, but I can see it for what it is. And for me, Narnia lacks the threat of, say, Middle-earth, in my opinion. Also, otters are knitting, and it's weird. Read some more, Lloyd, because I was drinking.
So T the writer says, "Oh geez, now I feel bad. I thought he was being serious about the hat." And he says, "I don't know. Narnia was cylindrical, much the same way the Wheel of Time was, perhaps." So I also haven't read the Wheel of Time, so I cannot comment on that either. So yeah, you're killing me with this, guys. For once, I have no statements to make.
Wheel of Time, I got a third of the way through, and I was just like, this hasn't got me, and I don't know what it was, and I closed the book and I never went back. I keep hearing a lot of good things about it, to be fair, but I don't have the patience. And I'm on King Killer. I'm slowly making my way through the second one, which I'm highly enjoying, and I can't wait to finish because a lot of people have said really good things about it.
Taylor says, "Challenge accepted. I'll try and come up with a bright hope game that Lloyd finds interesting." Good luck, Taylor.
Taylor, she always genuinely the best, though, for us.
Genuinely good luck. If you can do it, I will be very pleased and surprised. Mostly surprised.
I would love to see that. But I would also like a place in that game, please, just so I can witness it as it happens.
Jeff says, "Yeah, to my prior comment, I'm not saying no fun and jokes allowed. I'm just saying it's not the focus of the game. Funny things can happen in context, but I prefer overall focus to be deeper." I absolutely agree. And we kind of talked about that already. Taylor says, "Hobbits are bright hope." Yep, they are. In Middle-earth, in the Shire, they are. Everything's just kind of fine. They have really innocent little problems, like who's going to inherit this house and who's cleaning the dishes. Yep.
Pumpkin competition.
Yeah.
Who has the best marrow in their garden,
just boring stuff.
Basically go to 1920s England. No, probably even a bit earlier actually, and then just go into the Cotswolds, and you will be in the Shire, because that's all they concern themselves with. Bless them. I know. That's what they're based off. So yeah.
Jeff says, "In general, it seems like bright hope is designed to be lighthearted at bottom and not to challenge. It's meant to be conventionally fun." Yeah, I think that's probably true. It's not meant to challenge your beliefs or to put you into the mindset of somebody who, you aren't, or you wouldn't want to be, or put you in a world that is not your own, or sure, a world that's not your own, but you're talking about a world that's similar to your own. Yeah, I think it's not meant to challenge you. It's just meant to be a bit of fun.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm just going to read through these really quickly. I agree that hobbits embody, this is from Grayson, says, "I agree that hobbits embody bright hope, but the world Middle-earth they live in isn't. Maybe if there was a world of just hobbits." Exactly. Jeff then says, I have to agree. Hobbits and other small folk races tend to embody Braveheart perfectly. Just adds to my list of reasons to dislike them. Grayson then says, in my setting, I have the Hobbits as a small Tuscan raiders in my desert area. Fair enough. If that's how you want to use them, man, sounds all right to me. T then says, a cylindrical setting means that good is on top, then evil, then good, then evil again. Sounds a bit risque. A balancing act.
Get your mind out of the gutter, Rob.
Oh, man, a balancing act that tilts back and forth as time progresses. Narnia got scary and bad, then returned to good. Okay, I like that idea. That's cool. And then Taylor rather helpfully says,
Thank
heroes
you.
versus nobodies, which is our next topic. Thank you very much. Which is coming off the back of this. So, Lloyd, what do you like about running a game for a bunch of nobodies?
I love everything about running a game for nobodies. I think it's so much more interesting when it's just normal people who are doing a thing. I don't mean normal people like commoners, but I mean like all of the games are run in Iskloft, except for the most recent one where they were fighting a dragon. All of the games in Iskloft that I run are mostly games that are just for people. They're not heroes. They're just people. And maybe those people are warriors, or they're like a Volva, or they're a seer or a singer or something. But they're people. They're not heroes. Like, they don't identify themselves as heroes, and they don't have any interest in being heroic unless it gets them into the afterlife.
Yeah.
And so that's, to me, way more interesting than being a hero who like knows that they're a hero. Well, I don't know that that's true. I think it depends on like the setting, but I think generally it's much more interesting to play people who are just people, who are, like we talked about that, or T the writer mentioned that, like, needs pyramid. I like to play and run for characters who are on that like bottom rung. They need like food, shelter, safety is what they need, as opposed to any like need to save the world or defeat the evil or whatever it is. So my preference is to run games for nobodies. And like I say, those nobodies could be jarls, or they could be nobility or whatever, but they're still not heroes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really like that. Now, the argument that I can hear like ringing in the back of my head, and again, I think you're right, it comes down to the setting, which we have talked about before. But I mean, part of if you look at the classic hero's journey, like a lot of those heroes start as nobodies. So my thought is, where does that change? And I really like, I actually forgot to mention this to you, Lloyd, actually. When I was like, when I've been moving and packing, I've just had a lot of time where I've just needed to listen to stuff. So I whacked on your Yotanet campaign that you can find on Lloyd's channel, JARLDM. I recommend it. It's an absolutely fantastic game. It's from an Iskloft that is a little different to the way it is now, if I'm right in saying, Lloyd.
Yes. Yep.
But what I loved about what you just said is that there is an inbuilt part of your setting which is the thing required for people to become heroes in your setting. The fact that going out in a blaze of glory, dying with a sword in your hand will get you into the afterlife. There is like a decent motivation to becoming a hero. So where does that start taking effect in your games then, Lloyd? Like, when does a nobody start considering that kind of thing? Is there nobody to begin with?
So I think my definition of a hero is someone whose goals don't concern themselves as much.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So Marius is a hero because his goals are to defeat evil,
sure.
And to save the world. Or like the heralds in Middle-earth are heroes because their goal is to save the world from Sauron.
Sure.
It's not like to get rich or to be safe or to become a jarl or to, whatever it is, to steal the gem or whatever. And I think that when the motivations shift from, and this happens in Yotanet, when it shifts from the needs that I think are more interesting, mostly, which are trying to get rich, trying not to die, or trying to die dramatically, are the three main motivations in this class anyway. When it shifts from that to a bigger, and bigger is a problematic term, but like a more story-driven goal. So to save the world, or to stop the end of the world from happening, which is what Jotunnet kind of is about. They're trying to stop Ragnarok.
Sure.
And whatever it is. So when the goal turns from personal to like world, I don't say global because global has a different meaning in my mind, but like when it turns from your own sort of goals into goals that affect the whole world, you know, that's when you start to be a hero. And I think like Luke Skywalker or whatever is obviously a hero, and he becomes a hero when he's like, oh, I got to defeat the Empire or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think because the other thing that I want to say, rather why I use the term nobodies, is the fact that if you take, I don't know, they are, there's nothing special about them to begin with. Like if with a lot of cardboard cutout versions of D&D that you see, where like people have come along and they have like their 10-page backstory or whatever, where they have been summoned before, and to an extent that is true. Lore keepers, like you guys, have had careers before you show up, but you also have flaws and things that ensure that you might not be a nobody, but you're not a hero because you're, oh, I don't know, like a murderous son of a bitch that works for a psychotic order hell bent on destroying magic in the realm, or you can, you know, an apostate, someone that's been hunted all their lives. But then there's a certain point where they make a decision to become that. So I like that a lot. So there is always the potential for nobody to become a hero. But what about the games where they just remain a nobody? Like this, and this is something that I really like about your Isklav stuff, man, because there's some people that are just a mercenary and they're just there to do a job, and they're going to be a mercenary after that adventure as well, you know?
Yep. So like I recently played as Rugga the Red, who was a named man, which is like a custom barbarian path that I made, and it's like this champion. So like his job is when armies meet that. Exactly like in Troy, our favorite film, that like somebody can be like, all right, out you come, Rugga, you can fight their best man, and if you win, we won't have to fight about it, right? So that was his job, and he lost a home gun, he lost a duel, and so he was basically looking to like regain some fame and mostly wealth and a lord to serve. And so he like went to this crappy place, and the lord was like wimpy, and he like tried to do a mission and it didn't go very well. And then they were that Jarldom was invaded by like proper terrifying Vikings from way up north. These like terrifying like cannibal Vikings, and he was like, well, this will do. These are lords. I'll get rich with these. And so he like, that was his motivation. And so he just went and killed the Jarl he had been serving and joined them instead. And now he's just out there in the setting as another character in this Reaver crew, you know?
And there's such a great example. I love that idea, and it's a good concept from our favorite film. I love that you call it that. It is our favorite film of all time.
Agrius. Bo Agrius has this effect on many heroes.
Oh, that's so great. To be fair, that is a badass way to start a film as well. It's
great, yeah.
Perfectly. Like, you can say a lot about that film that's bad. There's a lot about it that's good as well. So whilst you're having a fag, Lloyd, I'm going to just rail off some of these questions.
Yes.
So let's see. T the Right says, ooh la la, Rob. I think that was because of my comments earlier, for which I will never apologize for ever. Taylor then says, I'm just going to say it. I almost never make a snowflake character who is destined to be a hero. Now, there is something to say. I will say this about like hero characters, because I'm running a game where there are hero characters. I like the idea of there being people who stand out from the crowd because they are exemplary at what they do. And like Lloyd was quite correctly saying, they're heroes because they're doing something that involves something greater than themselves. However, it does not mean to say that these people are still you know, perfect. You know, they are. I like it when they are doing this thing, but are still inherently flawed. I was absolutely insistent when we began Lore Keepers that these people who start off start off like, if you're going to use alignment, neutral. They're out for themselves, or they've lived their own lives, you know. And I liked the idea of them finding reasons to become a hero. Like, that's part of the story of Lawkeepers. I am quite with you, however, that there shouldn't really be snowflakey characters. I'm kind of with you there, because I think it's selfish. I think you're not considering who else you're with if you're a snowflakey character, because the snowflake tries to hog the spotlight. But as we all know, the spotlight melts the snowflake. So, what do you think, Lloyd? What do you think about the hero, like I just described there?
Yeah, I think that's the correct way to do it, is to become one. I think that's happened in Middle Earth.
Yeah, really
as well.
Yeah.
But it's classic Tolkien that happens, like that people become heroes. Now, the thing about Middle Earth is, and we've talked about this before as well, is that if you want to be a hero, you have to be a noble. Because Tolkien is an aristocrat through and through, and he believes in the, I would probably say eugenics, but certainly in like, certainly in like that nobility have better qualities to them than normal people, right? Yeah. And so all of the characters, I think, except for maybe Beregond, are noble. I think Beregond is as well, though.
He's enough to be like a warden of Minas Tirith or whatever he is. He's up there. He's still got class. He's got like a status. There's
something like in Tolkien that it's in your blood, that like your heroism is part of your ancestry, you know. But even so, like when you made those characters, like I think maybe there was an understanding that it's Middle Earth, and so you probably will be heroic. But I don't know. He didn't strike me as anyone made a hero, you know. Like everyone made characters who have their own motivations and like their own shitty pasts and whatever else. And the heroism kind of has become more. Come more to the forefront as we gain in levels, and the concerns that we're dealing with are bigger, you know, as opposed to running from a thing of orcs. Now you're like fighting the Witch King, or you're like trying to mobilize armies and stuff like that, you know.
Sure. And it's always like with Lawkeepers and like with Against the Shadow. I know we're patting our own backs here, but I think we have this one in the bag. Is that it's always been for both of those campaigns, it's always been something because of circumstance. You know, it wasn't something that they just woke up one day and thought, we're going to do this now. Like something happened in those characters' lives that made them have to make a decision, and they chose to help for whatever reason. Still doesn't mean they're perfect, but that's the interesting thing. It's like, you know, it doesn't matter like how heroic they are. Like Batman will always be interesting because like he is a compelling character, in my opinion anyway. Big fan of Batman, like is a compelling character and does what he does for certain reasons, and he lives by a code. He is a hero, but he's not a perfect individual in the slightest. He like jumps off roofs and breaks people's legs and fucks them up, you know, like but so that's my thoughts on heroes anyway. They should be born in the game, not existence when they arise, you know. Chalice and Chain says that's why I love Edge of the Empire so much. Taylor then says I much prefer ordinary people who get put into situations and have to make choices. Absolutely, what we were just saying. No heroes there. Well, not when I run it. Chalice and Chains continues.
What I really like about Edge of the Empire as well is that you have obligation instead of alignment, and so and the gist of Edge of the Empire is to make money, you know, and to like survive on the fringes of the Empire. And so you tend to have characters who aren't heroic, for sure. They're like nobodies trying to make their way.
I'm going to bust through these comments that Jeff just says. I generally prefer to be ordinary people. I will say I do like playing the hero every once in a while. I will say most games where people are heroes, there isn't enough focus or onto the burden of being a hero. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are a lot of pressures and expectations that'd go into that could be interesting to explore. I guess being a hero in a world that's not black and white like like most hero stories what would make it interesting, but being the conventional super good guy is less interesting. Agreed. I completely agree, and that's sort of what we've covered there. Now, Lloyd, you messaged me like a little bit before this chat because there's something you like talking about, because we're putting a lot of thought into these characters, wouldn't you say, Lloyd?
Yeah, so Marquise posted something just before we put this stream up, and it was something like, how much thought do you put into your characters? before you play in a game, and I put very little thought into my characters before I play. I tend to decide on mechanics. So I pick what I want to play, and then I think of three things. Those are: where is the character from, what do they need, and what are they willing to do to get it? And when I have those three answers, I feel like I have enough to play the game, and then I figure the rest out in the game. I don't like backstories, like big pages and pages of backstory, because I feel like it's already happened. It's not important that much. Like, it doesn't need to be pages. It needs to be, where are they from, you know? And if it affects them, you know, how does it affect what they need and what they're willing to do to get it? So I try to keep it as simple as possible and like not overthink it.
I think that's it's a really good point. I mean, me personally, I find, and this is going to sound like really maybe elitist, I don't know, but like, I find that when I start playing a game, that's when I realize what the character is. Like, it's kind of, for me, when I'm making a character, it's almost kind of conjecture as to what they're going to be like. Like you, Lloyd, I choose the class, I actually mechanically build the character, and I'm sort of thinking about it whilst I'm rolling dice to see what the numbers are going to be, you know, like I give it a little bit of thought. And like you, I just come up with like bare bones, the minimum, like what exactly are they, like what is their role in this game, and how is he going to interact with people. I also, me personally, I like to sort of visualize what they look like. I think quite physically, they're based with images. So like, I like to think of what would they look like and how would they move and stuff. Because at the end of the day, that's the kind of thing that you're describing when you're, you know, role playing and saying what they're doing in a combat and stuff. So I'm the same. I appreciate that some people do enjoy writing backstory, and I don't think there's no harm in that, because at the end of the day, while it might not be ever included in the game, it's still something that's getting people invested in that character to then bring into the game. So I can see the merit of it there, Lloyd, but I am with you. What do you think?
Yeah. So it depends. I think that like the most that you need to do is have a session 0 where you can discuss briefly why your characters know each other and what they know about each other. It's fine for you to have it in your head, like how your character got to where they are.
Definitely.
But I think that like there's a danger in writing too much and like coming up with this legend about your character before it's even begun, you know? I don't know that you need to do that. I don't know that you should do that, because it's probably not going to matter in the game most of the time. Would be my thing. So for Middle Earth, right? Like, you had some ideas about Faroth, but really, I don't think you wrote a big backstory. But I was able to, like, at all. But when I needed to, I was like, "Hey, Rob, what's the story with Faroth's dad?" Or like, "How is his childhood?" or whatever. And then you could tell me. But that was like several sessions in, and you had a better understanding, I think, then of what Faroth would have been like as a child. And I think that's probably better.
That is the best way to do it. And by then, like you say, I'd sort of gotten to know who he was, and I could then sort of like think of these questions, and I would kind of have like a rough idea. Well, he's like this, and he's like this, I guess, because he's an only child, or his father was like a grim taskmaster or whatever, you know. Like, so you're right. And it's the relevancy that helps me. Like, it's the interesting thing that like comes from, I guess, from my professional world and from things that I hear about writing as well, and delivering screenplays and things like that, that at the end of the day, like, the only thing that matters is the moment. And by that, it means that lots of people that are like method actors or whatever, going out saying, "Oh, well, what's my character backstory?" But you don't need that if that's never going to focus in the story. Your characters, actors, characters in screenplays and novels are there to serve the purpose of the story that's being told. So if none of that is relevant, then it won't come up, then what's the point of it? It's just needless. It's only when it's going to feature in the story, like you said, with Faroth's like father and stuff like that, is when the GM starts asking the questions.
Exactly.
So it's,
what's that? The Chekhov's gun? Is that the thing?
Yeah.
Where like if there's something there, it better be involved, and if like you just don't need it. You just don't need it. And if it's going to be important, then the GM will ask you. Or if you want to bring it in and do flashbacks, that's fine. But I wouldn't overdo it.
Yeah.
I think it's better to think of like needs and like what the character wants and what the character will do to get what he wants or she wants. I think that's more important for motivation than like where they've come from.
Absolutely. And Jeff says, I work out very little ahead of time, 2 or 3 bullet points and mechanics. That's all. The rest, I think it's easier to feel out organically in the game. I completely agree. Then Kaya says, I put a lot of effort into each character, but most of the effort is learning the setting that shapes them. That's interesting.
Yep, that's really important. And Kaya does do that more than anyone I know. I think that whenever there's a character and he brings a character to a game, you can tell that he's done research and it shows. I don't know how much like backstory he's written, but there's always like in setting thematic things to go with the character, you know? So like in Middle-earth, all the treasure and stuff that he comes up with, or in the Roman game that we played, just like phrases and like knowledge of the setting and of the history. And yeah, that always pays off. And I think that's worth more of your time, like researching the setting you're playing in, than writing a big backstory.
You're arming yourself with opportunities for role playing that will
Yes.
fit in the world. I think you're then basically aiding your own immersion, but the immersion of others. Like that's why it's a step up from anything else. That's like why we've always said that one of the best things to be one of the best players you can ever be for a GM is to like invest in the world that they're presenting you and give it back. You know. Give it back to the rest of the group and the GM. And Caius does that all the time. So, yeah, spot on, man. Where do we get to? Taylor says, I do so much, not for all my characters, but for most of them. It's how I learn who they are. And yeah, I think that's completely valid if that's the way you get to know them. And I know for a fact that certain writing can be really good, like, and especially if you're being inspired by these characters as well. Like if you actually like want to go out your way to like tell more stories, then I think that's amazing. But it might not always come up in the game, though. You just don't know. But it can be helpful, I suppose. We'll see. I guess it depends. Do you want to read some, Lloyd?
I do. Kaya says, when my character speaks, I want him or her to sound like a genuine inhabitant of the place with the values and language style of the place. Yeah, that's worth way more to me than who your parents and siblings and your old gaffer was. I don't think that's important. What is important is that your character fits into the setting. So I think that's the correct way to go about it. And then Taylor says that always works, which is right. T the Rider says, goodbye, Rob. Stay warm. Yeah, bye, T the Rider. I'll see you later. Where's my goodbye?
Yeah, that's a good point. He clearly doesn't. Yeah.
Jeff says there have been times where playing the character as I wrote originally felt wrong for the game, so I've needed to change them to work right in the world and game. I'd rather feel it out in the moment. Yeah. That's the danger too. Like if you write this big backstory about your character and then the game takes place 100 million miles away from where you wrote that, or the game is focused on something entirely different and you've put a lot of work into a certain backstory, then it's just been a waste of time. I think you're much better off sticking with like little motivations and figuring the rest out from there. And Taylor says, I've had that happen. I'm definitely gone with the flow for those times, I guess. Yep, I think it's dangerous. Kai says, Baragond, as a treasure hunter, knows snippets of lore about places he comes across, so I made a table of random Middle-earth treasures to lust after. Oh, you just said that. Yes, we did talk about that, guys. It has not gone unnoticed. Every time we go anywhere and there's like something to be found, you have this like, oh, it's the great... it's particularly the comb that I thought was great, but like lots of things like
hilarious.
That really add to the setting, and it makes me as a GM really keen to like give you that treasure because it's like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's
the reason why he's done it, Lloyd. He knew it was going to get to you. He knew he just wants to generate his own treasure.
And it works really well for the GM if you've like made stuff up and you're adding stuff to the setting and to the world. It makes it easier for the GM to like help you.
Definitely.
I think. So then Jeff says, agreed regarding setting. Learning the setting well gives you the tools needed to create a convincing character through play. Setting prep is much more useful than character prep. Yep, once again, agree. Drop Dice, hello Chris, says listening while working. Hope you're well.
Hey man.
And Taylor says, I did so much research on elven phrases before doing the spot in Lloyd's game as Megoradale. Yes, and that showed for sure, because we had like an elven conversation in that game with Megoradale. Actually, it was the next game where you went to Rivendell. There was people speaking in Elvish, and I felt that really added a lot to Against the Shadow for like the little time it was in it. But that's setting research, and it really pays. You know, we didn't have an elf in the party for a long time, and then we had one, and suddenly people were speaking Elvish, and it really felt genuine.
Yeah,
good.
It made me, and I was gutted that I missed that next session, because I was in the first one that Megoradale was in, but not the second one, annoyingly. But I remember that, yeah, Elven started creeping into the lingo of the game. So I was like, I'm gonna have to push myself now. Everyone else is talking Elvish. I'm gonna have to start talking Elvish because my character knows it. So I'm gonna do it, and I did the research. It's great. I love it. It adds so much.
And then Mike says, late once again, at least I got here. I got in at a good time. I prefer to let the campaign help tell my character's story. I agree. Once again. Okay, Rob, what's next?
So we are now going to be talking about something really cool that Taylor, who's watching at the moment, Mum's the Nerd, came up with for I can't remember the dates it's happening. Taylor, if you wouldn't mind putting the dates into
15th to the 22nd, I think, are the dates.
Well, soon in October, then there is going to be a great thing happening called Ladies Week in the Absolute Tabletop Facebook community. Oh, that's annoying. Taylor says I've got to run. Oh no, she was going to give us all the facts we needed.
Yeah, we were just about to talk about it. Sorry, Taylor. See you soon.
Cheers, Taylor. Take care. So it's for a really great cause, and it is basically encouraging to have female characters and to involve as many female players in the games that are run throughout the community as possible. And I think there's nothing but great. I think that's a great idea. What do you think, Lloyd?
Yeah, absolutely. I already play with Taylor a lot. I play with quite a few female players. I just play with humans, you know. That's like the way you should look at it. But I think it's a really good idea. I think for me, I've never played a female character ever. I am not female, and I've never played a female character. I think I will struggle with it because I tend to play characters who are like, yeah, what? Basically, you know, I play zealots or thugs basically most of the time.
Hey, women can be zealots and thugs.
Yes, of course they can, of course. But yeah, I just traditionally always played big burly dudes.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like I have played one or two, but not for any like lengthy period of time. The majority of me playing female characters, I'll be honest, is when I'm playing NPCs. I like, you know, play a lot of female NPCs, to be fair. And yeah, like I do try and keep it balanced for things like lore keepers. I throw quite a lot of female NPCs because there is a decidedly male cast like in the lore keepers, which isn't something, admittedly, something I didn't think about. But like, it's, you know, it's 4 dudes going on an adventure, and that's just the way the game worked out. But for Ladies Week, I am looking forward to. I'm hopefully going to be playing one of the ones that Taylor's running, which is going to be pretty cool. But for anyone interested, definitely go over to Absolute Tabletop and check out the Ladies Week. And there's a post, and it's still quite high up on the thing because like lots of people liked it, so it's still there in the feed. Go and check it out because there's a lot. In fact, you know what, Lloyd? If you can cover for me, I will bring out that post so we can actually deliver the information better than what I'm doing.
So I would for sure encourage you between the 15th and 21st to try and play a female character if you haven't before, and to encourage you to run a game that has an all-female cast, whether it's characters or players, preferably players, I guess, if you can manage that. definitely something worth doing. I think it's something that should be more commonplace. And yeah, we should just do it.
Yeah, it's and it's a great idea, and it's oh man, I'm so close to finding it. I'm so close to finding it. Cover for me, Lloyd.
Okay, well, I'll talk about what I wanted to talk about.
Yes, yeah, let's go on to that.
So I run a setting that is ostensibly historical, or at least vaguely historical. It's set anyway in the Viking Age of our world, except it's not our world, it's a fantasy world. But it's not our world. It's a fantasy world, and there are elves and giants and stuff like that, and magic. But it's meant to simulate the Viking Age in our world culturally, you know. So it's basically the Viking Age that we lived through on this earth, except it's not, because there are female players and female characters in the world. And that wouldn't have been the case if it was in the Viking Age. There wouldn't have been so very frequently. So one of the things I did initially with Iskloft, which I think helps with this, is that spellcasters are overwhelmingly female in Iskloft, and that comes from like Seither or Saith, which is like the magic that they used in Viking Age, and it's traditionally something that women did, which is great because it means if you want to play a caster in Iskloft, you have to be a woman, which is like an easy way to force people to play women occasionally.
That's a great idea, man. I really like that.
It comes from a real historical thing or whatever, you know. Hang on a second.
Oh, okay. Lloyd's gone. I'm like desperately trying to find that post, and I can't find it. Are you there, man?
Yes.
Sorry, man. I've jumped into cover. I still can't find that post. I'm losing my mind, man. So what is it about the actual culture then that would mean that magic lends itself more to women than to male? So
it's just like a traditional thing in actual Viking culture that like women's magic was like stronger. That there was like prophecy that women knew. It comes from like Voluspa, which is like the tale or the prophecy of the vulva. Vulva is like a term for like a seeress or a prophetess. And it's just like always been the case. Like Odin is the only Seith Carl, so a woman who practices magic is a Seith Kona, and that's like most of the sorcerers or wizards or whatever you want to call them in Viking mythology are women, except for Odin, because Odin can do everything. So that's really good, and I brought that into Iskloft, and that's fine. But what often happens in the setting is that people play female warriors, and that wouldn't have happened. Just wouldn't have happened, and it wouldn't have happened in basically most parts of the world. I mean, up until very recently, right? Up until the last last 50 years, maybe. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but like, I don't think that there were many women on the front lines of World War II, for example. I don't think it was allowed back then, you know? So there's a disconnect in the setting because there wouldn't have been female Vikings going on raids and going to war and stuff like that. Shield Maiden is like a term that we use as like an honorific, but actually a Shield Maiden would stand behind the battle line, and when the warrior lost his shield, she would run forward and give him another shield. That's like what a Shield Maiden was. And that's like not nearly as glorious or cool as like what it has come to mean, which is like a female Viking warrior.
Sure.
And that's like just not very, there's not much evidence to suggest that that was a real thing.
Yeah.
But obviously it's a fantasy game, but also it's a historical game. And so it's this weird thing. Like, I'm not going to tell you that I'm already so strict on what you can play in Iskloft. You can play a human and you can play, you know, a very small selection of classes, that I don't want to also be like, you have to be a dude. Even though that's probably what the case would be. So yeah, I guess that was my question or phrase or statement is, what are you supposed to do in a historical setting with equality? And So like we played a Roman game that Nick Dawson ran, and we were all men because we were Roman legionaries, and there were no women in the Roman Legion. But what if you're like running that game and somebody's like, "I really want to play a woman"? Do you say you can't? That's the question, I guess. And in Iskloft, if somebody's like, "I want to play a woman who's a Viking," and I'm like, "Okay, but you're going to be on a ship for like a month," like with 50 men, like you're the only woman. Do you think that's wise? And it's like horrible and grim, but also like that's why they weren't on the raids and stuff. So it's just like a tricky situation. I don't know.
It is, but I think you hit the nail on the head with Iskloft, in the sense that you're like, look, I'm not going to limit what you are in terms of gender because you're limiting so many other things. And to be honest, there is a level of suspension of belief, and I think that personally, I think that it would be cool for there to be female warriors in Iskloft, and I think that it would be cool to have female Roman legionaries. But I think the question you have to ask yourself is, one, who you're playing with, and are you excluding anyone from enjoying themselves if, for whatever reason, you're, saying that this is the only thing that you can play. Because I think if it's just like a bunch of people that want like a strictly historically accurate Roman game, then they probably wouldn't mind it just being an all-male cast, like following their progression throughout the Roman Legion or whatever. I think it's just about being aware of who's in your game, and you already do that. And it's just, I suppose, it's just asking people what they want. Like, do you want it to be like this?
Like, I don't feel guilty over it. Like, I know that I have no bias. Like I say, a human is a human in my eyes. But so like, there's definitely times when I'm like considering like I've never said no to it. That there's female warriors or whatever. It's always been fine, but there probably shouldn't be. But then again, it's a fantasy. But then again, it's historical. So it's just like this like weird thing. I guess if somebody like said to me that we don't play a female warrior, I'd be like, yeah, okay. That would be the extent of that conversation. And most of the time, if people post a female character, I don't say anything. I think it becomes more of a problem when it gets to like the magic thing, but it's in the other direction that way, because magic is a female thing. And so if you want to play a male spellcaster, you can't really, but then I'm thinking in my head, like, what if I had made that class the other way around and you can only be a man if you play this class? I'm like, is that fair? I don't fucking know,
I think the other thing, which one could prove to generate some really good role-playing game moments, and also some difficult issues that you might not want in your game. It depends. Again, obviously, you talk to your players, you make sure they're okay with what's going on in your game, 100% of the time. However, if you say look to Westeros, for example, it's a male-dominated world. Men hold all the cards, yet one of the primary characters is a woman who wears armor. She's called Brienne Tarth, and she kicks ass. She is a female warrior in a world where they don't really exist. Okay, but that makes her special. Now, that is a way of going about it. Now, you have to explain to the players at the same time that you're going to be surrounded by people that aren't going to be used to someone of that gender in that particular role. And you've got to check with them, is it okay for you to be the one that's on the brunt of this? You're dealing with the insults.
You'll be the butt of jokes for most of the game,
exactly.
For sure. That's actually a really good example, and I hadn't thought of that before. And I think that's what I will do in future. I might put down something vague in the book, like here are the traditional sort of gender roles in Viking Age and also in Iskloft. If you want to change anything like that, you're more than welcome to, but maybe be aware that like it won't be received well, in the culture. That's a good idea.
And Brienne Tarth, she has like a really rough time, but at the end of the day, it's about her character and her learning that she doesn't need to worry about what people are saying, because she has a purpose, she has a code, and she's really good at what she does. Yeah. Like, that's the thing about her character. That's what makes her so special. So in a sense, you are shouldering, shall we say, like the slightly unpleasant sort of attitudes of the societies that are being portrayed in Westeros and in Iskloft. Like, I mean, that's just the way it was, or what it's based off, like. But there's a way of showing characters sort of transgressing that, like becoming better than it and doing what they are anyway. So like that's the positive from it, I think. And I think that would be a way that you can approach it.
Yeah. That's a good idea, Rob. I will do that.
Oh, cool, man. I'd love to see that in Iskoth, actually. Like I'm bringing a Tarth-esque character in Iskoth. That would be pretty rad. I can see we have quite a lot of comments, and as this is the last topic, we're going to go for it, I think, and answer as many as possible before we wrap up. So I say we go to so Taylor went to pick up Kiddo. Okay. Jeff then says, I've only played a female character one time. In general, I find it much easier to immerse myself with less barriers. Same reason I rarely play non-humans. Every step between me and my PC is tougher. To RP, it's a challenge I'm willing to take up, though, and I'll be playing in one of the Ladies Week games that are coming out. I have no issues with trying to keep a setting historically accurate, but I agree that there should probably be some reasonable way to have female PCs involved no matter the historical era. Yeah. And there are ways, and that should never really be a much of a barrier. You just got to consider who you're playing with. You just got to be a nice person and ask.
Yeah. I really think that that's a good point about steps between you and your character. So like for me, that's why I tend to play like large beardy men, you know, like large straight beardy men who like because that's almost me, you know, like I'm not a fighter, but like there's not too many steps between me and that character, you know. And so it's easier for me to put myself in that headspace. It's way harder for me first, like to put myself in the headspace of like an elf, or like certainly of something as stupid as a gnome or a dragonborn or a tiefling, like. And then if you like put that and then put on top of it a different gender, I'm just like, I don't know how to imagine this person. You know, I struggle with it.
Yeah,
big time.
Like I like playing people that can talk because that's kind of what I do. That's what I'm good at.
Yeah.
So I say that coughing on my own words, but so yeah, I can see where you're coming from. Like there can be steps to avoid that. By just, you know, being closer to what you like, and I completely get that. But there are the other types of players that sort of like go for something completely different. Some people that are something different every time they play. And that's the good thing about these games that we play, I suppose. So yeah. Let me see. So what did you say about, because you said a few things there, Jeff, so I'm just going to have to quickly read over. I have no. Oh, no, that's fine. We've already dealt with that. Okay. Caius then says, one of my favorite characters was a dwarven shield maiden called Eldith. She was a prude who constantly locked horns with the femme fatale of the group. Good dynamic. Sounds cool, man. That sounds really cool. Chris from Drop Dice says, I really rarely play females myself, though when I do, I really like playing mothers. One of my favorite characters was a female Mandalorian who set out to find herself a mate of value in the first campaign.
Oh, sick.
That's really cool. And the second was her as a mother fighting Sith and commanding forces. Yeah, man, that's a really cool idea.
That's the right concept.
I mean, I wouldn't say that I've played many, you know, female characters. I guess because I don't know, like I wouldn't be uncomfortable playing a female character. I just don't, you know. I don't really have much of an explanation, to be fair, but I will be soon, which I'm looking forward to. Grayson then says one of the major countries in WE2.
World War II, he means.
Oh. Isn't it WW2?
Yes.
Because it's next. E's next to W. I see what's happened. I thought there was an abbreviation that I'd missed for so many years. One of the major countries in World War II had female snipers. I think it was Russia, but not 100% on that. You know, that does actually ring a bell. You mean like Stalingrad? Like, yeah, where it's basically every man, woman, and child. Like,
yeah, and Russia, because they were communist in the Second World War, felt that there was a better equality, and so they had female soldiers and particularly female snipers.
Freaking cool, man. Yeah, and you said it was Russia. Good job. Then Drop By says, Saga of the Icelanders handles that very well. Classes are divided by gender, but in a respectful way to the setting. Vikings. Saga of the Icelanders.
Yep, it's a powered by the apocalypse game that's like set in Iceland. I haven't looked at it too much, but I've heard a lot about it. I've struggled to get into Powered by the Apocalypse, but there's a lot of really cool settings for it. So I'm going to struggle some more and hopefully get into it.
Yeah, cool, man. Okay. Carson says, we were Roman men, but the Belgians had some vicious women.
That's true.
Watching that game, that was a good game, and there's some great female characters in that game that like hit you for 6. Like for the one I watched anyway, my goodness. Rachel says, but that's really the only reason. Oh, sorry, I've skipped down a bit. I think if you want to make your setting as accessible as possible, it helps to have a place for both male and female PCs, since from my experience, a lot of new players like to play their own sex. Yeah, absolutely, Rachel. I think inclusivity is should be a number one thing that you should be considering when working out who's going to be playing in your game, and secondly, when people are playing in your game, you're then like, well, what do people want to be, and how can I help you achieve what you want in this game? Remember, it's not just the DM's game, it's the player's game as well. So that should always be considered. And then Jeff says, I think if you're going to push for non-standard gender in historical accurate games, you need to make them aware of the consequences for that. It's a choice that while may create extra trouble. Yeah, and I think if you deal with it sensitively and you're not, you just say, well, are we okay? Are we all okay about this happening in this game? Like I mentioned with Brianna Taft, like you're going to get a lot of flack for being a woman who's like fighting, but you're also going to be a hero and amazing, and you should be able to transcend that, and that'll be your story. So yeah. Do you want to read some, Lloyd?
Yes, I do. Rachel says that's really the only reason I would say you'd have to find some way for any sex PC to be played. Yep, sure. I think I think that's fair. I think if you're playing like a game with people that you know really well, you could potentially say like, okay, look, it's an all-female group or an all-male group or whatever it is. But I think if you're new people to the game want to play themselves most of the time, I think, or like something close to themselves. It just says, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with putting restrictions on gender for a game, though it'd be best to let that be known up front and make sure your group is up for that sort of game. Yeah, exactly. And we talked about this with the card and all that sort of stuff, and just like making it clear from the get-go what your game's about.
Oh, yes.
And then Grayson says, this question has me torn. As a DM, I don't want to limit my players in what they could play or do, but at the same time, if it doesn't make sense through the setting, then I would be inclined to not allow it. And that's a really tough question. I suppose as long as the player can have it make sense within the setting, then it should be allowed. Yeah, I think that's right. I think it is a tough question. I think it's like a difficult thing to deal with. And it's something that has vexed me with Iscloft for sure.
Yeah, but like end of the day, like you've just got to decide like what's more important, like being inclusive and letting people have a good time, or your setting. And I think you should probably know the answer to that.
Obviously my setting.
Obviously your setting, yeah. No, but like you're diplomatic about it, you're a nice person, you consider everyone's thoughts and feelings, then you will be fine. Like it isn't difficult. Just be a nice person. And I'm not saying anyone like seeing this isn't, but I mean, it should just be common sense. Where I don't know where we are.
No, it's okay. So Kaya says, for Women's Week, Lloyd, play somebody clean shaven. I mean, that's a woman, right? That's the
of course, yeah.
Men have beards. That's like the obvious answer there. So I'll play a female character. And then Droplight says, if my Dragonborn have beards, will you play one, Lloyd? Think bearded dragon is just a bunch of spines. No, I still wouldn't play a Dragonborn, even if it had a beard. Even if it had an axe and a round shield and a spectacle helmet, I still wouldn't play a Dragonborn. Even if it was called Gunnar Gunnarsson, I wouldn't play a Dragonborn.
Would you let a Dragonborn itself play a character in Iscloft? So the character isn't a Dragonborn, but the person playing it is a Dragonborn.
I wouldn't want any Dragonborn playing in my game.
No.
No, I'm a horrible human supremacist.
Yeah, you'd be like, you're a horrible alien beast. Why are you in
I'd
my
probably
life?
just be screaming in terror and flee. I think would be
You'd be terrified if there was a
yeah,
dragonborn in your house.
7-foot lizard creature. And Droplight says Russia also had female pilots, which is true. This is like one of the cool things about communist Russia. One of the few cool things about well,
Yep.
it depends on your point of view, but they had a kind of a much more equal amount of soldiery, which also meant that way more people died.
Yeah.
So it's really a question of what you think is good or bad about it. Right, Rob, we've come to the end. That was long.
It was. How long have we gone for?
Nearly 2 hours.
Nearly 2 hours. Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you ever so much for dropping by, guys. It's been really cool. I've enjoyed having a chat. I feel like we've dealt with a lot of helpful issues here. This has been cool, man. Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say? Anything about Lloyd before you go? Anything?
I don't think so. I guess next Monday we'll be playing, exactly a week from now, we'll be playing our next Against the Shadow game, where Rob here and several others will be confronting the Witch King of Angmar. And that's probably it.
Cool, man. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So make sure that you hop over to JARLDM next Monday to see us inevitably suffer at the hands of the Witch King, because Lloyd's running that game. I don't think we're going to be okay. And for those of you who want to stick around on my channel, you will shortly see on the 13th of October the next session of the Law Keepers, including Lloyd, is going to be taking place. It is called the Law Keepers Chapter 10 Equinox, where maybe we will find the answer to Taylor's question that she asked earlier. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And be sure to check out this channel for other stuff and other games that I'll be running soon, now that I have a connection that isn't run with coal. So without further ado, thanks to JARLDM for joining me here, and I hope that all of your performances are up to standard. Toodles.